Hey, how you getting on? It's the other John Brown that looks like the other Devin Townsend, and this is another intro to the intro. My apologies, I have a bit of a cold I caught at Guitar Summit, and that's what this intro to the intro is about, because most of you guys probably know me from speaker videos. At Guitar Summit, I got to talk to my buddy Ignazio from Jensen Speakers, an actual guitar speaker expert, and I just had to take the opportunity to ask him a few questions that I always had about speakers that I'm sure some of you guys are interested about too. A couple of things I want to say before we get going. This was at Tube Amp Doctor's booth at Guitar Summit. Guitar Summit is a silent show, at least when it comes to guitar tones, but it's not silent when it comes to the people. There was a lot of traffic going by. It was quite noisy. I did my best to denoise the audio, but you will be hearing some artifacts, especially in between sentences where there's breaks. There'll be some artifacts popping up, just so you know. Also, looking back and forth a bit during the interview because I was using these wireless lav mics for the first time on my phone. I kept checking if it was still recording. I was terrified that would drop out, which was good though, because the microphone on my camera, the audio on that was absolutely useless. So yeah, I think that about covers it. I hope you enjoy the interview.
Hey, how are you getting on? I'm at Guitar Summit with Ignazio from Jensen Speakers here, and he's graciously agreed to an interview.
Wow.
So I'm using my phone here as a cheat sheet. I've prepared a few questions for him. Basically, first of all, Ignazio, I'd love to know how you got into the guitar speaker industry and how you discovered your passion for it, basically, because I cheated a bit. I checked your LinkedIn, which says, I think you're a marketing specialist, really. Yet you seem to be one of the most knowledgeable people in the field I've met so far when it comes to the technologies of speakers and how to develop them. Would you care to tell us a bit about that?
Well, well, first of all, thank you, because it's how can I say? I'm discovering this new side of myself, because I never thought of myself as an expert. I have no technical background in the sense of I'm not an engineer. I've done classical studies at school, so, you know, ancient Latin, Greek, that kind of history, philosophy. But I was involved into, my passion for the guitar thing started very early in my preteen years. I kind of discovered really quite soon that I didn't have the spark, the talent to be like a rock hero or guitar hero. And I always found myself, playing guitar for passion, but dealing a lot with the technical side of things. So I was the guy putting the hands on the mixer and doing the sound and doing, you know, all the things that my bandmates didn't want to deal with. So I started, you know, studying how things happen, how things are made. Mm-hmm. And I started very early becoming passionate for vintage gear. And when the whole Jensen thing started, I was the only one back in the late 90s having a very rough and really basic understanding of which were the tones, the speakers, and you know, everything that made the sound in the golden era. And when we got involved into the reissuing the vintage speakers, from day one, I was the guy signing off if the tone was right or wrong. Mm-hmm. And when you work with a speaker manufacturer, with a factory that is very openly willing to do whatever you want in terms of prototyping, in terms of changing parameters, changing materials, formulations, you have to learn along the process what happens when you change certain things, which if you build a speaker by the book of rules that you use when you want to build a hi-fi speaker or a pro audio speaker, what you change is really predictable. The guitar speaker is a wholly different beast. So it's you have to learn that not every action generates the same reaction. Not every time you do something that should turn out in a certain sonic result turns out in that very way. I mean, I watched your interview with Christian Kohler when
Yeah.
he was talking about his experience in developing the Carnivore, which, by the way, is a great speaker.
Yeah.
These remind me of the days of what we do every week or every month or every year doing this. But really, I developed my skill by listening a lot to the product, to the tones, and listening a lot to the engineers, and being curious enough to ask them for explanations whenever something is changing. So we make 2 prototypes, and I want to listen to them before seeing the data sheets.
Okay, to not get biased.
Not getting exactly to avoid the bias. And then we exchange views, we exchange comments, and then we look at these data sheets to understand how far off we are,
So,
and if we are off at all.
so designing a speaker isn't really a straightforward process. You mentioned a rule book. There's just rough guidelines, you could say, like
Well,
sidewalls, and apart from that, it's mostly iteration. Let's see how these.
In the guitar business, yes, it's mostly iteration, trial and error, and do it again, change it again, throw away everything, starting from the scratch. Again, if when our factory, which is basically an OEM factory that does what customer wants in terms of industrial customers, when I don't know. Put your name, a big PA manufacturer like El Acoustic or Deum Bay or these kind of guys come to us, they come with like a very thick pile of data sheets and details and information, and what's the diameter of the voice coil, what's the diameter of the wire of the voice coil, and how much excursion. So you have a really well-guided path you have to go through, and you know that if you put a bigger magnet, this is going to happen. You know, if you use a heavier cone, this is going to happen. While in the guitar business, this doesn't happen. Most of our customers, when we go there and we sit on a couch with an amplifier in front and we say, okay, let's try this, they don't even look at the data sheet. They do what we do.
Okay.
They put the speaker in the box and play it. And if it sounds right, then we start looking in details. But if it sounds wrong, it's just off the table.
To start over. Okay.
So do I have a technical background? No. Have I developed a certain set of skills coming from the critical listening and understanding the basic parameters? Yes, I did it, but I did it on the go.
So you're a keen observer, and then after the fact that after your observation, you learned what could possibly influence that perception on a technical background.
Yeah, that's the right combination of
We're getting Henninged again. Every time I do something like this, we get Henninged. Like,
Yeah, the 3 of us share very similar haircuts, so it's...
So the process you described, on the one hand, it sounds incredibly exciting. On the other hand, it sounds like it can be incredibly frustrating as well. So just looking at all the parameters, just really roughly, you have the cone, thickness, material, corrugations, doping. You have the voice coil former, windings, thicknesses, materials.
Yep.
Then you have the magnet with different field strengths, different magnet materials, all that. That's dozens of moving targets. How does the process work? How do you decide to pin one of these parameters down? Like say, okay, we're sticking with this magnet, and now we start playing with different cones or different voice coils. How is there a process you go by, or do you just wing it every time?
Well, along with time, you learn certain recipes that you use as platform, as launch basis.
Yeah.
So if I want to develop, or if a customer asks us for a certain specific set of sounds, say British sound, a British rock-oriented speaker, we know we have to start from one parameter, which is the voice coil diameter.
44 millimeter voice coil.
44 millimeter, 1 3/4 inches. Because the bigger the voice coil, the smoother will be the top end, and the higher will be the power rating. So a very small voice coil makes the speaker very light, very easy to drive, It won't be able to take that much of power, and it will be, being light, it will be very bright sounding. So the 144, the 1/3 or 44 millimeters, kind of has a basic characteristic, especially in the mid-range, that gives you the grunt, the crunch that is typical of the British tone. If somebody asks us for a very smooth, high power, with an extended top end but not aggressive, we may want to go for a 2 inches voice coil. And we kind of start from there, because from the diameter of the voice coil depends the magnet assembly, the magnet construction, because in the magnet you have to have the gap where the voice coil sits in.
To move, yeah.
So it's impossible to have a very small magnet and a very large voice coil.
Yeah.
There's a certain sets of variables that you need to match. So basically, voice coil and magnet are the starting point. Then the real character of the speaker comes from the membrane.
Yeah.
Membrane, its corrugation, its doping, the diameter of the dust cap, and it's also the less controllable variable, because, you know, metal is metal, copper is copper, magnet is magnet. Once they are done the proper way, you have very small variations in your production run.
Yeah, on an industrial scale, those are parameters that are fairly easy to control.
Absolutely. Or if you use synthetic membranes like polypropylene or carbon fiber or fiberglass, which maybe you use in hi-fi, that's very easy to control. The variations between a single production of membranes or even more batches of membranes is virtually nothing. Paper is paper. Paper is wood.
Yeah.
It depends on when the wood has been harvested, more humidity, less humidity. So I wouldn't say we discharge or reject the same percentage of membranes that maybe an amp manufacturer rejects a percentage of tubes, but it's not that far off. We have a specific set of measurements and tests that we do inbound before assembling the speaker on the compliance, the rigidity of the membrane, the weight, the resonance frequency, and if they are outside a certain target, they need to be rejected, because otherwise the speaker will sound different from batch to batch.
Are there specific engineering, or let's say tonal reasons why for guitar speakers we don't tend to use modern coil materials, or is it just that it won't pass the sniff test for guitarists? This is new, I don't trust this.
No, I think there's a tonal reason. You know, we've been used to this kind of sound for 50 plus years.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to the man.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to change the mental habit of the guitar players. You know, we guitar players are probably the most conservative market segment in the whole industry, not in this industry, in the whole industry. You look at the NAMM press releases and you say new products, and it's reissue of the 57 something, reissue of the 65 something, reissue the new old. It's like we like that stuff. But the origin of this is that in the beginning, the quest that the amp manufacturers were making to speaker manufacturers was sensitivity. You need the speaker to be as loud as possible, because the amps were like 6 watts, 8 watts, 10 watts. So in order to be light, it's paper. It has to have small voice coils, because it gotta be as loud as it possibly can, you know, to have the semi-hollow or gypsy guitars being balanced in volume with the, you know, the brass section, the horns and stuff. And basically the technical evolution of the guitar speaker has ended up in there. In the mid-60s, everything that needed to be discovered was discovered. From there onwards, until the development of the neodymium magnets and until the development of the FR, or say flat response full range speakers for digital modelers, basically nothing has been revolutionary. All has been refinement.
I think you're onto something there with guitarists being a conservative bunch. And in the speaker world, we've seen that with neodymium magnets, as you've mentioned, because they've been around for at least 2 decades. And it feels like to me, they're only starting to penetrate the market right now. With Jensen pretty much at the leading the charge almost, because your competitors, they might have 1 or 2 neodymium magnet speakers in their portfolio for guitars anyway. But with Jensen, I can think of at least 4. You have the Tornado Stealth.
Well, we have 4 12 inches, 1 10-inch, and for guitar that we used to have some more in the past, but they have been like phased out because they weren't really meeting the tones we really wanted. You know, the point is, we both are, you know, young enough to remember how bad sounding were the first generation of CDs and CD players. Let's say digital music. Just because it was a new technology and the industry wasn't really evolved or wasn't really understanding the technology to make it sound at its best potential.
Yeah.
Where along with time, digital mastering has become an art, and you know, you take the CDs or the DVDs of after a certain, you say, break point in terms of time, and they were a fantastic sounding device. And even both the disc were mastered in the right way, and the players were playing in the right way. And neodymium is kind of that kind of thing. You know, when we started, we made the same thing that everybody else made. We ripped off a ceramic magnet and stick in the back of the speaker a neodymium magnet about the same characteristics. And we thought, should sound the same. Hell no. And then we have to understand why, and it took time, and certain damages were done. You know, there were an increasing skeptic approach from the players. And neodymium doesn't sound right for guitar. It was like, it does because we haven't understood how to make it sound right.
Yeah.
Now, along with time, we understood that the impedance curve and the dynamic behavior of a neodymium magnet is actually closer to the way an Alnico magnet behaves. So we started voicing the speakers as if they were Alnicos. And then the neodymium magnet does the right thing. So now, if you listen to a speaker and happens to be a neodymium and you like it or you don't, is not because of the material. It's because you agree or disagree, like or dislike the engineering voicing choices that have been made onto that speaker.
Okay. That's interesting. I think, and Jensen in general, I think, have a fairly unique positioning in the market. When it comes to voicings as well, I think Jensen probably, at least to my perception, covers the widest spread of tonal variants, because for one thing, it seems to be very important for you to create really faithful reproductions of the classic Jensen designs that were in early Fenders. At the same time, you're working on incredibly modern speaker designs as well, like the Neodynium magnets, like the Tornado Stealth series, the latest one, the Stealth SE, Tornado SE, sorry.
Yes.
So, and I feel that is somewhat by design. That's a purpose, a decision you made on purpose.
Yes, it is. In a way, our heritage with the traditional classic clean American tone obviously is a blessing because it's where the Jensen heritage comes from. But on the other hand, it's a curse because we have never been appealing to the metal players or the hard rock players, which have been into the Celestion ecosystem for decades, because we were out of that market. We were out of the guitar market, actually, completely. Since the end of the 60s until the early 2000s, for 40 years, we've been disappeared. So there's a very good reason why Celestion took over, and those years were the years of rock.
Yeah.
And so the Celestion became the synonymous of the rock sound. So when we came back, we started where we left. So we started with the Alnico reissue of the speakers of the 40s and the 50s, and the ceramic reissues of the speaker of the 60s. But then we needed to move to do something different, to do something more contemporary, and so we started making original designs, original projects that were aiming and looking at contemporary tones. And contemporary tones means like cleaner cleans, less in the edge of breakup kind of tones. So cleaner cleans and speakers that are able to take massive amounts of gain. And, you know, along the time, we went through different voicing stages because, you know, the lead tone of the 80s is very different from the lead tones of the last 20 years, which is different again from the tones of the last 5 years.
True again, yeah.
So that tells you why the Nighthawk is really looking to the 80s thrash metal.
Love the Nighthawk. It's one of my all-time favorite speakers.
Hair metal, right?
Yep.
And then you look at the Nighthawk was developed in the early 2000s and was already looking back. It wasn't looking forward. Then speakers like the Raptor that has been developed in 2018 was already looking for a more organic, less scooped kind of tone.
People tell me I need to try that one.
Yeah, you need to. Good. And then the last generation of let's say rock-oriented speaker, which is the basically the Tornado Special Edition, is a speaker that is tighter in the bottom end, and who doesn't like a tight bottom end?
Yep.
And we made it thinking about, you know, low tunings, detunings, multi-strings. It's got to be precise and high definition. And also we needed to smooth out the top end in order to allow the speaker to take enormous amounts of gain without becoming fizzy in the top end.
Yeah.
So if you look at the frequency curve, you will see that there is a mid-high peak, which is what we call the presence peak. And then there is a very natural, organic, smooth roll-off, about starting from like 5K to 6K. It goes down in a kind of progressive, and it doesn't have those spikes, those rebound resonances. Because those, with the clean tone, you don't even hear them. They are maybe 20 or 30 dB below the average sensitivity. But with the high gain overdrive, or overdrive in general, overdrive is harmonics. Harmonics build up in the upper range of the spectrum, so those resonance, those spikes, they come up.
They really pop
and
through,
they get almost to the average zero level, and that's when your ears start bleeding. So, you know, the contemporary metal tone is richer in the mid-range, lower mid-range, and it's got to be very tight in the bottom end to give definition. And the amount of gain that the players use today is incredibly high, respecting in looking back to the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
So you need to have a tightly controlled top end.
So you'll have more harmonic buildup, which will make these spikes more abrasive.
Exactly.
So that's why.
Exactly.
So that's the modern design philosophy for these modern speakers. Okay, to make sure that they don't have those resonant rebounds.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool. Again, I think most speaker manufacturers seem to focus on one voice coil diameter, or maybe two. Jensen seemed to be pretty brave in that regard. You have a vast selection of different voice coil styles.
Because in the vintage era, the Jensen voice coils were basically 1 inch for the 20-25 watt ranges, 1 1/4 and 1 1/2, which was in the 30 to 50 watt. Well, actually, the power ratings back then were much lower because the foamers were made of paper, and paper is thermally unstable.
Yeah.
When we made the reissues, the main difference that there is between our speakers and the original vintage speakers is that we are using synthetic foamers that are way more resistant to thermal variations, so they can take like twice the power. So our 1 1/2 is 50 watt. In the 60s, 1.5 was barely 20 watts. But I mean, we think nowadays it's unrealistic to offer to the market an 8, 10, 12, 15 watt speaker. I mean, who's going to make use of that? It's going to be too fragile, too unpredictable, too unreliable.
And does that have a noticeable influence on the tone of the speaker?
Yeah, the smaller everything else being equal, the smaller the voice coil, the higher energy on the top end.
I actually meant the voice coil former with the synthetic material.
Oh, I'm sorry, voice coil former. Yes, it does have an influence on tone, and we speaker by speaker, model by model, we selected the material that was behaving as close as possible to paper.
Okay.
So some are conics, some are nomics, some are fiberglass even, but fiberglass is only in the modern speakers. But usually we change from paper to conics or paper to nomics depending on what kind of tone we need to get out and how to get as close as possible to the originals. But let's say usually these materials are harder, and so the overall sounds seems harder. There's a change in the attack perception, and there's a change in the energy in the top end.
Well, as well as different voice coil sizes, Jensen seemed to have a pretty broad selection of speaker sizes in general. There's a 15-inch speaker in front of us right now, and I think I tested one of your 10-inch speakers as well, and I think I even saw an 8-inch speaker over there.
Yes.
So,
and again, this comes back from the heritage, because the vintage Fender Champs were 8-inch speaker, and the Princetons were 10-inch, and the Super Reverb, the Bassman, were 4x10. So all those, if you need to do a reissue, you need to have that kind of, you need to have those speakers. And you know, there's a big market. There's a lot of people still playing with those speakers. And so definitely in the vintage range, there's something we needed to have. And, you know, we decided to keep a certain availability of variations even in our modern speakers, and that's a good example. This is the 15-inch Blackbird 100 watts, and this was born as a practical joke. We wanted to, you know, after 25 years, we said, you know what, we need to celebrate ourselves.
yes.
And so we say, okay, how can we put everything we have learned in 25 years of the new Jensen history and put them into a single speaker? And we went for this, which is very unusual because 15-inch is not very popular today. And we wanted to go for like a special metal paint on the basket. This is actually a Mercedes custom color.
I can see that it sparkles. I don't know if
it
it comes through on camera, but it has a metallic sparkle to it.
And we wanted a laser etched label with the signature of our founder, Raimondo Sbarbati. And we only made 100 pieces of this.
And they're individually engraved. This is number 37 of 100.
Yeah. And so this is called the Blackbird 15 Signature Edition because it's signed by Raimondo. And has many different things, has a special corrugation pattern on the membrane, a custom doping to have the right amount of stiffness that we wanted in order not to be flubby, which is a problem with 15 inches. We use our reinforced Alnico technology, which is a technology that allow us to like supercharge the magnet to have like 30% more flux without increasing the weight and the size, which is a cost problem. And we kind of we throw in everything that we knew. And then we say, okay, let's see if this sounds anything interesting or if it sounds like absolute shit. And we played it, and it was great from, I think, prototype 1.
Cool.
And we refined it a few more iterations, and then this came out. This appeals to the Stevie Ray Vaughan, John Mayer kind of fan.
Yeah.
Because both Stevie Ray and John Mayer used Vibroverb, which is a 40-watt 1x15, recording the first album of Stevie Ray and the Continuum album of John Mayer. They were using, among all other amps, they were also using a vintage Fender Vibroverbs. So this has that kind of full fat, full range kind of tone. Not too much of the presence peak, so it's kind of even, hi-fi-ish, and has surprisingly more treble extension for the size. You don't expect too much trebles from a big speaker.
Yeah.
This has a remarkable extension on the top end, mostly due to the reinforced Alnico magnet.
It's a very interesting looking speaker visual for one thing, because the ribs or corrugations go almost all the way down to the dust cap. I can actually see the pole piece of the magnet in there as well, which was very interesting. And I noticed that the spider is kind of extruded a bit. It pokes out there a bit. It's not flat, not level with the frame. It's very, very striking looking speaker in general.
Yeah, and I have to say that in spite of the price, which obviously this is not a cheap speaker, it's pretty expensive. But yeah, the success was pretty good, and yeah, we almost sold out of the entire limited edition.
Cool.
So it's great, and how can I say? Again, it was time. We felt the urge to celebrate ourselves for once in a while.
I think it's healthy to do so. Cool. So maybe to come to an end, I have a question that is, with things moving more digitally, amps and IRs, cabs and that, do you think real speakers and cabinets are on the way out? Or is it actually the opposite? Is the move to digital signal processing, digital sounds, actually helping highlight this part of the signal chain, meaning cabs, speakers, microphones, that might have been a little neglected before, and because guitarists usually wouldn't hear the mic sound but would hear the room sound? I can say certainly that was a part of my discovery of actual guitar speakers, was using IRs with a load box some, 10, 12 years ago, where I really noticed, okay, that really shapes the overall tone significantly more than I gave it credit for initially. So is it the end of real speakers, or are we actually experiencing the new golden age of guitar speakers?
Well, I think the guitar play. I think we are experiencing the golden age of guitar gear in general.
Yeah.
But I can't recall a single moment in history where the guitar player had so many choices when it's about speakers. And our experience is that when we launched our IR collections, one with THU over loud and one with two notes in the two different ecosystems, the most immediate feedback we got was people who never played a blackface Fender or a Tweed Deluxe or something like this. They, I tried this amp, I tried the IR of your speaker, I actually really like it, and I would like to buy the physical one for my amp. So I think, in general, digital and analog are having two parallel paths that sometimes overlap, but I don't see a winner and a loser anytime soon. I think they will move forward together. There will always be the customer who wants to grab a small tube combo and go and play in a small club.
Yep.
And as much as there will be the guy who says, I don't want to deal with any of that, I just want my digital pedal board with my IRs, and I just send the tone I have dialed in with nobody interfering to that straight to the PA. So I do both things.
Yes.
Actually.
So not just peaceful coexistence. It seems sometimes there's areas where it's actually mutually beneficial with the real speakers.
Absolutely.
I found that too.
There's a lot of amps that now, you can use the amp and make yourself heard on the stage with the tube amp, and then the tube amp has an IR loader, and can send the preset signal to the front of the house. So I mean, why fighting each other? It's much easier to work together rather than fight. We as a manufacturer, yes, can I tell you that the tube amp market is growing? Of course not. I would be silly telling you that. But we as a manufacturer, we do a lot of FR speakers for our customers. Coaxial, dual cones, separate two-way systems. So we see that market growing as much as we see growing the amplifiers for acoustic instruments. Because, every guitar player has more guitars and has one more, maybe even more than 2 amps. Yeah, well, we have, we don't want to say how many amps we have, but the acoustic guitar player may have 4 or 5 different guitars, and maybe he doesn't have an amp.
Yeah.
So there's a huge growth potential there because those amps are meaningful. So from a let's say mere economical, balance sheet, looking at the bottom line, even if we see the overall size of the tube amps decreasing a little bit, but we see other markets coming up. But we are certain that as long as tubes will be available, that market will exist. Of course, it's the 4 factories that are left in the world will shut down in the next 2 years. There won't be any more tubes. So what the hell? But there will always be the need for a grab-and-go solution where you have a guitar, couple of pedals, an amp, you plug in, and you play.
Yeah.
Without having to deal with the more complicated stuff. Even the young kids that we think, young kids are technological. Sometimes they are very much willing to dig deep into the apps and their phone, but not even their computers.
Yes.
And they don't want to have anything to do with that when they just want to get out with friends and make some noise.
Yeah.
So when electronic drums came on the scene, acoustic drum manufacturers feared the end of the world for them. 5 years went by. Electric drums were kind of fading away. Acoustic drums are all over the place.
True enough.
What can I tell you?
Well, I can say thank you very much for this conversation. I enjoyed it a lot.
My pleasure.
I learned something again, as I always do when I talk to you. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Ciao.